Uh, so I'll start by welcoming everyone. My name is Christine May, and I'm welcoming you today as an uninvited guest on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Syilx Okanagan people. As curator here at the Kelowna Art Gallery, and on behalf of the board of directors and staff, I would like to respectfully acknowledge that we operate, gather, and benefit every day on the land of the Syilx Okanagan Nation. Tonight, we are joined by artists Hannah Jickling and Reed H. Reed, whose exhibition Pinking Index is on at the Kelowna Art Gallery until May 7th. The exhibition presents a new body of work that features an index of calligraphy and monoprints created from school ground refuse. Jickling and Reed are the artists behind Big Rock Candy Mountain, an ongoing project with elementary school students that produces edible art editions. Throughout the run of the show, a limited edition poster called Zigzag Zillionaires will travel to a selection of Kelowna area classrooms, which provides a link to our in-gallery workshops. Hannah and Reed have been collaborating since 2006. Their projects take shape as public installations, social situations, and events, which then circulate as photographs, videos, printed matter, and artist multiples. Thank you both so much for joining us. And just a reminder, I see more people are joining us at this very moment, but a reminder to all of you who are attending to please save your questions for the end. And then we'll have a 15-minute Q&A period. And at that time, you can type your questions into the chat bar, and we'll try and get to all of them. This talk is being recorded, and it will be put up on our website sometime early next week for everybody to enjoy. So Hannah and Reed, I will pass it along to you. Thank you, everyone.
Hi.
Thanks, Christine.
Yeah, thanks so much for the intro. It's so exciting to, there's many familiar names in the participants box here. So yeah, so happy to see you. Well, not see you, but to know that you're here. Thanks so much for taking the time to pop in on this. So I see some folks also from where we are beaming in from right now, which is Dawson City, Yukon on Trundaquichin territory. And this is where we live part-time. So that's where currently where we're at. And as Christine mentioned, we are going to talk for about 45 minutes. Going to have a few moments for some questions at the end. And we wanted to just start off quickly by giving a little bit of some context and history to our work together. And then eventually, closer to the end of the presentation, we'll kind of get to how we arrived at the prints that are currently up at the Kelowna Art Gallery. Okay. So Hannah and I, we've been working together for 16 years, I'm going to say, something around that. And our collaborative work is generally like these long-term public participatory projects. That's our interest. And most recently, we've been working in school, public school settings together. And this work kind of started, oh, there we go. This work kind of started in Toronto in 2012. We were invited to be artists in residence at the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education at U of T. There was a research project that was kind of looking at the intersections of pedagogical theory and participatory art, and this was led by Stephanie Springe. And actually, there's another artist who worked on that project who's in the audience. Hi, Hazel. And so Hannah and I were invited because our practice is rooted in these kind of histories of intervention art and performance art, dialogical art. So we seemed like a good fit for that project. And through that project, we were invited to create these interventions with young people in public elementary school classrooms. We spent a long time, kind of the longest time, with this one group of grade 6 students, and we made some sculptural chocolate editions with them. And through this project, we really started to think about the influence and purchase that candy has on young people's lives, and that how with sugar, like sugar is so powerful, and you can use it as an entry point, and really it can take you everywhere. So this was kind of the inception of that in us about the power of sugar. And so with that group of students, we made a bunch of chocolate multiples, and then we had all of this like energy and excitement and all of these unanswered questions. And we took all of that energy and excitement, and as you do, you make a book. So we made this book, which is kind of a reflection on that project. And you can see the cover is an image of the sculptural chocolates that the kids made. And then we invited a bunch of writers and artists and theorists to think with us about some of these kind of unanswered questions about working with kids in public schools and questions of taste. So just some of the essays in that book were about the classroom. The public school classroom is a place where you could exhibit art and make art, all of the complications and contradictions inherent to collaborating with kids, the adult-child relationships, and the kind of like the joy of working with kids and the kind of contact high that you can get from just collaborative work in general. The ordering of the senses and how much primacy the visual sense is given, especially in school systems, versus more kind of like felt or bodily senses like smell and taste and touch. And there's an essay in here that kind of digs into the racist ideologies that produce those hierarchies between the senses. And then another essay on kind of the unruliness of art that happens outside of gallery spaces, and artist multiples being an example of this. Whoops. Oh yeah, okay, so Hannah, I'm gonna hand it over to Hannah.
I'm just reading notes from my computer, so if I'm looking in different directions, forgive me. I think, yeah, as we were preparing for this talk, I mean, we've given a version of this talk many times, but I think kind of a thread that we keep coming back to or questioning is like, what is the thing that motivates our work, and what continues to motivate our work, and what feels juicy, what feels like burnout material, I think. And so as Reed mentioned, we did this chocolate-based research project with students, and yeah, it was highly logistical and stressful, and we were constantly adapting the project to meet students where they were at, and for us to meet them where they were at, and to figure out in a very active way how to move together inside of a project so that nobody felt left behind. And despite kind of the living kind of hectic nature of that project, we had this experience every day of leaving the school and having a really good laugh about things that the students said, and kind of what happened together in the live space of the classroom. And so when we were thinking about how our practice might develop from this project or the series of projects and from the book, we were like, yeah, why do we like working with kids? Like, how do we name this thing about working with kids? And kids obviously are all individuals, and it's not always useful to lump them into the same category. But there were some kind of there are some images that we wanted to share that I think speak to kids as a motivator in our practice, and like why choosing to be in proximity to them enriches our own art practice. So this image is, I think, was taken in late 2013 or early 2014. Some of you might recognize it. It made waves on Twitter at the time, and it is a kid who's lying down on a Donald Judd artwork at the Tate. And I get it, it's stressful. There's a kid lying on a piece of really expensive artwork. They're not supposed to be behaving like that. But there was something about this kind of misuse of the artwork, I don't want to say irreverence, but that maybe this image could be an invitation to think about her dog just groaned. Could this image be like considered a legitimate expression of appreciation for an artwork instead of a kid, quote unquote, misbehaving. Here's another one that kind of speaks to the feral qualities of kids: curiosity, irreverence, unpredictability. And it was those qualities that were like offer a lot to us, we felt, in our approach to art production and research. So you can see at the top of this image, at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, an abstract gets close scrutiny. And you can see the kids are looking at, quote unquote, the wrong thing. And so it's something about their ability to point at the structures that house art, to make visible the things that are otherwise naturalized or unseen inside of these art worlds that we participate in. That is helpful perspective in terms of what we've unlearned as we've progressed into adulthood. And so, yeah, could children be the next wave of institutional critique in museums? And could their like misdirected kind of appreciation be considered an extra kind of competence? We had the chance to work with Jack Halberstam in the production of the book, and he asks, kid knowledge about life, about embodiment, about art, and about power is really cultivated and tends to be cast as a naive version of what adults already know. And this is kind of a jumping off point for Big Rock Candy Mountain, the project platform that we have been developing for the past 6 or 7 years.
Oh, am I taking over on this one? Okay. So not quite, yes. Okay.
We're going to talk about like our personal stakes in the work.
Do you want to start with yours? And then
yeah, I think, yeah, this is a project we started in our neighborhood in Vancouver, in East Vancouver. So for the most part, it lived with the students, teachers, and administration, and us, and other sites for artist projects, and our good friend, producer, and curator, Vanessa Kwan, at Queen Alexandra Elementary School on the corner of Clark and Broadway. And we're both from this neighborhood and feel a connection to East Vancouver. And I think that if I think way back into childhood, a lot of my kind of shenanigans were about negotiating capitalism and trying to make money and trying to have things and trying to like, I really wanted a Cabbage Patch doll when I was 5, and my parents wouldn't buy it for me. So I made a bunch of money that I could bring to, I don't know, sellers so that I could buy it myself. I also spent a lot of time buying candy from the gas station down the street and then repackaging it and upselling it to the kids on my block. So there's kind of like this trail of unresolved stuff, and also like that's about belonging. Like I finally got a fruit roll up in my lunch like once and brought it to show and tell at kindergarten. So like at such a young age, capitalism obviously infiltrated, and I don't want to say that there wasn't agency there, but it was definitely something I was trying to negotiate and kind of invent my own power or workarounds, I guess, within that.
Yeah. And I think about it like just like being a person of a certain age now, and growing up at a time where if you were like a young queer person or a young like genderqueer person, you were not guaranteed to see yourself, or you're not guaranteed to kind of be affirmed in mass culture. And so there was something about creative reading for me, or feeling like you have to find sustenance. And unfortunately, a lot of the time we're surrounded by garbage, but you have to find sustenance. So for me, like, that sustenance can really come from anything, from all this like trashy stuff. And I think that's kind of with a project like Big Rock Candy Mountain, that's what I'm interested in, is how you can kind of like find your agency within things that you don't necessarily have control over, but you can find a way to have a creative reading or agency within it, which I think comes from being a queer person of a certain age, but I would be really curious to know what other people think about that. Okay, so moving on. Just wanted to show a few images of the school. Something that we notice about public schools, always incredible amount of visual noise, wavy borders, polka dots, many colors, desk culture, all kinds of mess everywhere, beautiful mess, shopping lists. So again, you kind of see like what has currency and purchase, school ground garbage. So what's circulating, what are kids choosing when they can choose for themselves? And then like, where's this influence coming from, and how is it getting in? How are we dealing with the culture that we're swimming in?
Do you want to read the shopping list?
Oh yeah, back to the shopping list. Shopping list. Slurpees, large, 5. Kinder Surprise Egg, 2. Hickory Sticks, big bag. So again, it's like the context being that the only place to buy food is the gas station near the school. Okay, so Big Rock Candy Mountain was like this kind of a logical proposition developed between Hannah, myself, and Vanessa Kwan, and the proposal was like, what if we made a candy factory in an elementary school? And so we kind of did, and we worked with classes of kids to reimagine junk food in some absurd ways, and we've made a bunch of edible additions. So each one of these, like, I'm showing you 2 images, Bubble Trouble and Pop 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 Pop. Both of these projects took a year or more to complete, and we don't have time to kind of get into the whole process of them. But we will talk really quickly about one project, the project that's in the vending machine at the CAG right now, which is called Sour versus Sour. So Sour versus Sour was kind of our first edible edition that we worked on. And it was basically started off, we were preoccupied with this idea of taste and how, like, both gustatory and also cultural, and how is it that, like, can we come to some kind of consensus about taste, good taste, bad taste? Do adults and kids agree on taste? Do kids agree with each other? So the class, we started with a group of students and we just did a bunch of taste testing together, and we created some fun structures to try to generate new flavors. And one of them was this kind of spin a smoothie, where we would generate tastes by spinning the wheel. Here's an essay from another quote from Jack Halberstam that seems kind of relevant.
Do you want to read it from here?
Yeah, actually. Is kid culture always in bad taste and always opposed to adult culture? Are there ways of reorienting our mature conceptions of taste to allow for the possibility that children's culture, even in its tackiest forms, is something valuable to offer adults? Oops. Oh, so here's some kind of like worksheets, I guess. Good taste and bad taste, just brainstorming. Bad taste: soap, lead, leaks, weeds, iron. Good taste: gummy worms, Sour Patch Kids, don't know what the third one is, lollipops. And then bad taste: nail polish, eraser, tape, shampoo, and chalk. So, and part of this interrogation of taste, it was all about how do we make a shared language? So building a language together to talk about what we were experiencing on a bodily level. So this was descriptions of smoothies: dark blood with skin, bango, which I think that student made up. makes me think of when we eat dinner with barf. Scared, nervous makes me think about apricots. These are also about smoothies. Thunder with green apple. And then the limits of language, so thinking about shapes to represent flavors. And then I feel like we reached the apex here with emojis to express experiences of flavor. And my personal favorite is like the roller coaster tongue with the eyeballs popping out. So this is when we were exploring sour flavors. And Sour versus Sour, we worked with a social enterprise called East Van Roasters, and they kind of took us along every step of the journey. So they're like a very conscious chocolate maker, and they do all of their roasting, grinding in East Vancouver. So we were able to see everything happen. And then each student designed a chocolate bar which had taste inclusions that were appealing to them. So each student made an edition, their own edition of 4 chocolate bars. And you can kind of see those on display in the school hallway there. So that was kind of the end of the project with the students, but we had a conversation with them and said, we're going to go away and make a compilation bar that kind of integrates some of the conversations that we've had and some of the flavors that we've discussed together. And that is how we came up with Sour versus Sour, which I think, are you going to take over?
Yeah.
Great.
So this was kind of described as a battle in a bed of bitter chocolate. And the compilation bar felt very much like producing a publication in the same way that we produce the book, or that there's kind of a narrative or a story or kind of some kind of a summary from a process that we felt like we wanted to tell after this research project. And so that's where the choice for inclusions in the chocolate bar came, as well as the packaging. So we were riffing kind of on the currency of sour candy, which was kind of new to me. Like, I don't know if people know Airheads and Toxic Waste, all this crazy candy that uses like cute illustrations of nuclear explosions, for example, to kind of amp up the currency or appeal or extreme sour candy for kids. So we kind of rode the coattails of that, and we're thinking about fake versus real, adult versus kid, trashy and classy, crinkly and slick, good and bad, high and low. And yeah, I mean, we kind of posed it as sour versus sour, but also are interested in how all of these kind of distinctions can live together in one bar. So on one side, there's lemonade, wild cherry flavored nerds, and on the other are sour cherries and lemon rind. And it's still cool to think about which side people prefer, and it definitely doesn't fall along the adult kid distinctions. The packaging features these kind of synesthetic images and emojis that the students drew, and then the backside has acknowledgement for each of the kids that participated. They were really excited to have their names on the packaging. This might be the only chocolate bar that has like the Canada Council logo, the BC Arts Council logo. So all of our funders were listed here. And this is where I had a question for the audience. I don't know if any of you feel like typing in the chat, but I was curious what your read was on what makes this look like a quote unquote real chocolate bar, if it does.
Okay.
Feel free to
Chat in.
chat in. We think we know what makes it look like a real chocolate bar, but curious to know. Oh, Hazel. Hazel knows.
Yes, pinked.
The pinking index.
Yeah. I'm not sure if anybody else can see that. The pinked edges.
Oh, the palette and the shine.
Oh, the color palette.
Thanks, buds.
Yeah.
Thanks for chiming in. We definitely wanted the package to be crinkly, which was fascinating. We brought these to an art book fair the fall that they were released, and people were really upset about paying $10 for a chocolate bar in a crinkly package. There wasn't, yeah, I think people were expecting them to be cheaper, which is fascinating. The pinking edge came from all of these drawings of chocolate bars that we have collected over the years. And this started with the first chocolate project we made, which is that 9 times out of 10, if a kid was drawing a chocolate bar or we asked a kid to draw chocolate, it wasn't necessarily the chocolate that was drawn so much as the package of the chocolate. And we're like, oh my God, is it the package? Is that the thing that makes it legit? And not only the package, but the zigzag edge on every package. And the zigzag edge is a function of these horizontal flow wrapper systems. So if you think about how it's made videos where you like peel back and look into how products are produced in the world, horizontal flow wrapper systems package, seal, and cut like granola bars and chocolate bars, all kinds of food packaging. And so these flow wrapper knives are, you can get all different zigzags and all different knives that cut the packaging as the food is being sealed. So we were like, oh, the thing that makes a chocolate bar real is that has permeated so deeply into kids is the zigzag edge and the signifier of industrial production. So we really intentionally riffed on this. We weren't producing, I mean, let's be real, these are like artisanal chocolate bars that cost a lot of money. They're kind of dressed up as something much more campy than maybe what they are or what you'd expect. And we've been making them in batches of maybe 60 to 120 bars at a time. We just finished our 15th edition. So we've been working with East Van Roasters for a long time to kind of produce them on an as needed basis. But because we were working with such small batches, we weren't able to use the horizontal. We did buy some pinking shears at Michael's. And yeah, I guess the thing we were thinking about was inhabiting this kind of like industrial realness or a retail realness. And I think the question still is like, does that performance of a thing help it infiltrate into different worlds or build some kind of a cred or a different cred? And then we're still thinking about like children's culture and camp aesthetics, and then what Xian Nai would call like the gimmick. So I think we're thinking a lot about gimmicks and capitalist aesthetics and how these forms that we're using are riffing on how they're working or not working. Yeah, so pinking shears. Stay tuned for more on pinking shears. But just quickly, yeah, this has been a very fast, abridged kind of version of what these participatory projects look like. And obviously we're the people that are talking to you right now about what happened. And I know every student would have a different story about what happened, or kind of what was interesting or not interesting, and what stuck out to them from every project. So we're aware of the fact that we're the ones kind of representing this project to you. And yeah, and this is a part that that we're learning to live with, I think, in every project, is the complexities of every project and the new sets of questions that arise, things that feel really uneasy, things that are unrecognizable or unruly, and the sets of contradictions that we're inside of as we move forward in these projects. And those are, like, I think about how to recognize agency and authorship, and how to think about intersubjective exchange in a way that's cool. um, like, I think it's maybe not trendy right now to talk about or represent the experiences of other people, but somehow we're still, like, sticking with it. Another question is, like, documentation and how these projects are historicized. We have published a lot of images from these projects on Instagram, and have had quite a strict criteria, mostly that prevents us just from showing pictures of kids smiling next to the works. So right now we're filtering through all of our photo documentation to think about how to use it. One thing that struck us as being really funny in a lot of photos from projects in classrooms are, like, adult hands. So you can see it right in the edge of this frame. I think this might be Vanessa's hand, kind of reaching in to help. And we've been collecting all of these hands in folders, which we call adult interference hands, which is kind of a way to acknowledge our presence in each of the projects, and the negotiation of desires, and what our adult projections might be onto kids, and what their projections might be onto us. So right now, these quote unquote adult interference hands just live, well, they're living in the gallery right now, but also as these kind of Photoshop files. We're trying to figure out how to use them. We also have all of this imagery from an artist talk series that was kind of about camp and drag and the performance of gender in a grade 3-4 classroom. So we had a bunch of guest artists come to talk about their practice, and we're kind of experimenting with how this lives as image and text, again, without having to show kids' faces. And yeah, we've been hanging out at Malaspina Printmakers, thinking about how these images also function as prints. So this is a photo lithograph, and we exposed candy wrappers directly onto the aluminum plates. We kind of realized each one requires its own exposure time, but we do have, like, zigzag wrappers kind of at the bottom, and pixie sticks, different kinds of wrappers. I wouldn't say that this was a success, but it's definitely an experiment. I think this is also part of the story about thinking about what motivates us. And when we finish these projects, we're kind of like negotiating, trying to figure out how to negotiate these. And Yeah, it's a story, I think, about how our practice has shifted and how to locate the things that feel juicy in a given moment, or what kind of momentum will keep us moving through a project. And so we were thinking about just taking a cue from texture. And this is a video that we can play while I'm talking, but it's from the production of our Bubble Trouble project, and this is chewing gum being churned with sugar and rolled and scored into gum. And one thing that we experienced, I don't know if it took us by surprise or it was just it stuck out, was in these taste tests. So we didn't go into a lot of detail about Bubble Trouble, but there was a lot of taste testing of other gums as we were deciding how to produce our own gum with students, which then became Bubble Trouble. And we were in a grade 6-7 classroom. Students had all kinds of stuff going on and all different investments in different parts of the project. But there was something about taste testing gum that everyone really equally had access to and their own personal relationship to, because it's something that's in your mouth and the flavor is demanding in a way, and the texture is demanding. And there was something about texture. I think we're still learning how to talk about texture, but it definitely guided the next steps in our practice, which then fed into the show that's the Kelowna Art Gallery right
so
now.
In the last 5 minutes, we will show some images of the exhibition that is currently at the Kelowna Art Gallery called Pinking Index. So galleries are a little bit challenging for us, I would say, like an interesting challenge, because most of our work exists in like these long-term participatory engagements, maybe ends up in an edition or a multiple that can exist in many different spaces. It's really interesting for us to think about how to locate our practice inside a gallery space, because we don't just want to kind of drag remnants of a project into a gallery space. We want to treat it a little bit differently. So, and also somehow that it feels really fraught to try to create like a totalizing narrative about a project. So it felt important to approach the gallery space a little bit differently. And we thought it would be a great opportunity to dig into some of the more kind of like specific material details that we've been talking about, like crinkles and edges and shape, like ready-made shapes and tears. And so really giving ourselves an opportunity to think about the material of candy. And we wanted to try to reprocess some of that visual noise. So you can see here, so Pinking Index is one part of the exhibition is a series of collagraphs made from garbage that we found on school grounds of the school that we worked at in East Vancouver. And we thought we had started collecting these a long time ago and then started reassembling them into compositions. So they became kind of these ready-made shapes that we could just play with as a print. And the thing that I really enjoyed when I was working with them is thinking about like you've got like this very machine, you've got the precision of machines with the zigzags and the precise cuts, but you've also got these really human qualities too, which are all the tears and chew marks and the way that we're kind of interacting, like the chewed off. We maybe don't have an image of it here, but pixie sticks often have these really great kind of chew marks at the top. So it's this nice combination of both, like the interaction of those things. And then there's the like kind of calling back to some of the familiar motifs of schools, this boardette. Again, focusing on like Hannah was saying, taking a cue from texture. So generally pulling all the color of it to focus just on the texture of the material and the shape of the material. So these projects became like the reason Pinking Index for us was a way to think about how do you make a record of what's there? Like in some ways kind of formalizing the garbage on the school grounds and like really taking note of what's present and creating compositions with them. So, and then also, I'll talk about that in a second, but another part of it is how do you kind of, because the work that we're used to doing is so much about improvisation and collaboration and liveness. What I guess for us, it's like this ongoing interesting question is like, how do you make a record of those kinds of projects? What do you pull focus to? Is it the narrative of the project? Is it the material of the project? Is it and that's kind of this ongoing, I guess, like the ultimate dangler of the moment is how to kind of like work with the peripheral material of these long-term engagement projects in ways that still feels generative and new to us. Yeah, I want to also, I think that's pretty much all we have to say, but do you want to say anything about this poster?
Yeah, Zigzag Zillionaires.
Yeah.
I guess this also just funnels into the question about how to use a gallery and we often get this question, which is like, why don't you do gum again? Which maybe we will, or why don't you do pop again? Or can you do another chocolate bar or do the same version of every project and make it into a standardized kind of workshop? And somehow we haven't been able to get there. And I think it would be more efficient, but there's maybe some loss in the reproduction or the formula of it. So with the opportunity to show these prints, we made another print, which is a visual cue that points to workshops that we have produced before, which live in all these folders and files and PowerPoints on our computers. So the kind of challenge, I think a COVID era challenge too, when we first wrote this grant, was to think about how to move parts of this show back into a classroom and how to repurpose all of this workshop material that we have already produced. So we are formatting each of these workshops. So in the image, you can see garbage press, mouth sculpt, soda study, pop sound, sour blast. So that the education staff at the Kelowna Art Gallery can use the material that we've already generated, which draws a lot on other artist practices who are working with pressing garbage or using gum as a sculptural material or exploring the sonic possibilities of soda, which incredibly, there are a lot of artists who are working with sound, effervescence, beverages, water. There's lots of precedents for that, and thinking also about sound and scores and imagery around sour taste testing. So yeah, this poster was produced as an edition of 25. It has yet to make its way into classrooms in the Kelowna Art Gallery, but it is a new commission. We're still figuring out how it works. And yeah, I guess it's like almost like a study guide, I guess. We're experimenting with the form of a study guide. And
should we?
I think that's it.
Yeah. Like, seems like we got, yeah, I mean, it would be great to hear some questions. It would be great if we could hear people's voices. Is it possible?
I think they might be disabled.
I don't know if we can hear people's voices, but I have the chat open and ready for those of you
Christine,
who
we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Uh-oh. Can other people hear, Christine?
Yes. Okay.
Oh, Natalie, you can hear everybody? Hold on.
Jen can hear everyone.
So
Try again.
We got you. We got you.
It was
Okay.
actually, we can't hear you.
Okay. Okay. We can all hear each other. So
Yeah.
I'm going to ask those of you who are interested in typing in a question into the chat, and I can read it aloud, and we can delve in a bit deeper into some of the things that you just spoke about. And in the meantime, while we're waiting, do you both want to talk about some of the upcoming projects that you have on the go or what you're working on this year?
Yeah.
What are we
I guess
working on?
one like, yeah, it goes back to the danglers. So we have a grant that we haven't started working on right now, but it's I guess it kind of started with the question of like acknowledging that Reed and I post-produce kind of the story of each of these projects. And not to say that the projects aren't circulating in other ways or through other narratives, but I guess we were curious and careful. I think we're careful to not assume that we're empowering youth, for example, but we were like, what would it be like if we resourced students to tell parallel stories alongside the development of these projects? And one example that I always think about is from the soda project, like how examples of the culture in a classroom kind of filter into projects. And for some reason, the students were really into albino rabbits.
Squirrels. No, rabbits, you're right. Yeah.
Like, and it just came up over and over and over again. And we were like, actually, it would have been really cool if there was a story about Pop and albino rabbits. And the, you know, the kinds of culture that they're looking at and using to inform each of these projects, I think would make really interesting parallel narratives. So the this seed grant, y'all should check out the seed grant through the Canada Council, is to think about resourcing students to tell stories, and also about how social media, like literacy around social media, how it works, how algorithms target us. And I think that's more or less.
Yeah.
That's one answer to your question.
Thank you.
Christine?
And Jen has a question, which is, can you expand a bit on the study guide thing? Is it posters or is it also something else?
It's a bunch of folders on my computer and Reed's computer, and trying to figure out how best to use it. Right now it's being sent as kind of as separate workshops to the education team at the Kelowna Art Gallery by theme. It's a PowerPoint and a PDF. And
it's a lifestyle brand.
And yeah, and then a series of questions and prompts, and we've been experimenting with different formats too, like some study guides include definitions of the terms that we're referencing in the artworks that we're looking at. So, and sharing links to other artists who are working in similar ways. I think the form is something that's still in development, but I think, yeah, I guess it's a document. And we do need to still figure out the logistics of how these posters get to schools.
Yes. Yeah, well, we welcome the experiment, so we'll be part of it and see how it goes. Natalie also has a question, which is, you briefly touched on the challenges of moving your art from a classroom to a public gallery. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. Um, I guess like because of our background and interests, and I think that we both kind of come out of like a DIY scene, like myself, I would say from like a music punk scene, and Hannah, like zine cultures and the like. I think for it's interesting now meeting artists. Like we have a friend, and he wrote a paper about Charles Saatchi when he was in his undergrad. Like it was always on his radar that he wanted to be in a gallery with his work on the walls. And that was actually never really on my radar. I was more interested in kind of like queer punk cultures and like culture kind of zipping around in different, like you're like sharing mixtapes and whatever. And then I think that that ethos has been in the work that we've created together, where it's kind of more about like you build your own circulation network. And so something about the adaptations of working in a public school where it's like shifts day to day, like you're kind of like you're doing one thing one day, and then you're improvising, and things are not like solidified. It's more so there's something a bit intimidating actually about like thinking about like holding something still for a long time.
Mhm.
So that yeah.
I think that also there's been a change for us though, like thinking about garbage and these shapes and the zigzags as these ready-made compositions. I think we still have a lot of questions about compositional possibilities for what we're doing, and I don't think it necessarily feels resolved, but this was a chance just to deal with shapes and textures and ink and wet paper and presses. And also, yeah, I think we maybe, I don't know if we've been suspicious of the gallery, but it's also um it's also a safe place for art, and I think I appreciate that more and more. And so there was something about really digging into formal presentation and framing choices and inking choices that felt also like more internal decisions that didn't have to be shared with a group of people. And yeah, so I think that goes back to the really like the safe space of the gallery for weirdness, and that's not always, yeah, I think I flip-flop on that sentiment, but that's definitely um or thinking about the gallery as like new forms of visibility or platforms for a working process.
Mhm.
That's a long answer to your question, Natalie. Thanks for the question.
Yeah.
That was a great answer. We probably have, yeah, we have time for another question. And if no one jumps in, I might turn it back to the exhibition as well. And if you want to talk a bit about some decisions that you made, some difficult decisions that you made during the exhibition planning process in terms of exhibition design and vinyls and framing, as you mentioned. What was that like? Because the art was finished, but then there's this whole other piece in the presentation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think knowing that the poster was going to live in school and thinking about bulletin boards and this like scalloped edge, the boardette that has shown up in some of the prints, and thinking again about the like how to reprocess the visual noise of school and down to the thumbtacks that are used when hanging work. So we took a cue also from thumbtacks, which is hard to see in this image, but we kind of were working with the classic Staples issue, like yellow, white, red, blue, green, and clear, and used those colors to inform the colors of the frames, including the clear tacks, which we had some plexi frames made for, which I don't know if we have.
We might if we back it
here.
up here. Let me see. Whoops. Doink. Uh-oh. Okay. Sorry.
Let's just see.
Mm.
We
Yeah,
do.
that photo.
Yeah, so these two were a set, and that the bordette continues between the two, as does the pixie stick. And there are straws and straw wrappers and a beef jerky package. So there was something about the continuity between the two images that we didn't want to disrupt with a colored border, but the plexi kind of was a exciting challenge to think about using as a frame. And yeah, I don't know, Christine, I'm kind of curious to throw that question back to you too, because you were there as the install decisions were, I mean, like floating around, but then also had to be concretized and committed to, which I think there was a lot of anxiety for us in that.
Yeah.
I don't know if it came across at the moment.
No, you were
time,
very calm, cool, and collected in the moment, but it was a lot of not last minute, but kind of in situ decisions that we made regarding the vinyl. The framing, of course, was done, but with the vinyl placement and the placement of the frames, which is or the actual works, which was also kind of unconventional. It's not just like all the work standard, in a row at our standard viewing height, but that made it exciting because you walk into a room that's unlike any of the exhibitions that have existed in this room before. And so I think, it's scary in the end when you don't know exactly how it's all going to come together, but we're all really happy with how it ended up. So
Thanks for rolling with our last minute decision making. It's okay to call it that.
Yeah, no, it worked out really well. So
yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, thank you both so much for your presentation, and just the background on your practice as a whole was really interesting. So thank you everyone for joining us as well. And as I mentioned, this is recorded, so we'll have it up on the website in a few days, and we'll be able to share it with all of our friends and our larger community. So thank you again for joining us, everybody.
Thanks everybody for showing up.
Thank you, Christine, too. It's been great to work with you. And thanks, Natalie.
It's our pleasure. Thank you.
Okay. Good night, everyone.
Have a great night. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.